Okay, they want me to continue my tale. So you have to go back to our talk about um, the book review of The Razor's Edge. And in the book, the protagonist, Larry Darrell, a World War I veteran, goes to India to meet the godman. Now, this is where I'm in trouble because apparently I can't pronounce the. It's not even the original name. I looked into Wikipedia, and the man had. It might have been a Tamil name. It was from South India, and then after this Indian man had his spiritual awakening, um, somehow he got a new name, and I was calling it Ramana Maharshi because that's how I heard it on a video. There weren't that many videos about Ramana Maharshi. Um, Please forgive me if I continue using that pronunciation. But there was one where there was a British man who was talking about Ramana, and he used to give question and answer, and it must have been translated from perhaps Tamil to English. And the Englishman kept on saying, well, this is the questioner, and this is what Maharshi said. And I don't know where that video is, but that's pretty much where I got my pronunciation from. But, upon review of the Wikipedia article, it's quite likely that the British man was pronouncing Maharshi incorrectly, and so am I. So maybe it's Maharishi. Deepak Chopra didn't talk about Maharishi, but sometimes he talked about the Rishi, the seer. And I don't know. Beyond that, they wanted me to change topics. There was one video we watched this morning about Ramana, just call him Ramana, I guess then, and it was a talk about silent transmission of self, which is very much like the Zen silent transmission of mind that perhaps Bodhidharma was famous for and other Zen patriarchs. So it sounds to me like it's the same, just because if they're not the same, then it's going to make me very confused, because if self is not mind, then I know when I was researching that silent transmission of mind, they didn't have a good word for it. They even said in the book, um, whoever wrote that book, I don't know. Okay, I found the book. It's this one, The Zen Teachings of Wang Po, and if I'm spelling Wang Po incorrectly, then again, it's because I barely have a command on English. And these foreign names in foreign languages, transliteration, I guess, is best. But anyway, what I wanted to say is in this book, somewhere where they're talking about it, that's what they basically said. We've got something that we want to name, or somebody named mind in the Zen tradition in using English word. God knows what it was in Chinese or Tibetan or some other language, Sanskrit, I don't know, but they didn't know what to name it, and so the way it was translated into English by Blofield was mind. And is the mind of Blofield's Huang Po the same as the self of Ramana? I'm going to have to go with yes, because if they're not, then we don't follow the law of one. In other words, are all the spiritual traditions about, generally speaking, the same thing or not? And I know it's a big assumption for me to say they're all about the same thing, because they're really not. And when you read them, they're a hodgepodge of different ideas, and you can go off diversionary tactics in every different direction and see where it takes you, which is just fine and dandy. But if you're trying to see if there is indeed a perennial philosophy, then you have to look for commonalities in these different spiritual traditions of planet Earth. And I cannot say definitively they all mean the same thing, because the people, Wang Po and John Blofield and Ramana are not in the body. And if I could connect to them, by telepathy or something, well, they haven't made themselves available. So I'm doing the best I can. And the reason I wear the 33 hat is because that would be the 33rd degree of a Mason, who is expected to be pretty smart in many different kinds of things this way. But I have no idea if a 33rd degree Mason knows anything about Zen or Isvara, personal god of somebody Hindu. So, like I said, it's a big jump to say it's all one and the same thing. And sometimes I might say, well, let's go with the assumption that they are one and the same thing. And another video I might say, well, now let's go the other way and assume that they're not and see where that goes. Okay, and then my friend DJ Laurent wanted to remind me of an adventure that we went on with Rumpelstiltskin, a 2,700-year-old elf. Rumpelstiltskin had a great intellect, and he was always looking for someone who was like me, primarily. That's why he came to me, because he thought that I needed to meet a real intellect instead of a phony baloney one. So he came to me in order to demonstrate that after 2,700 years he'd had time to refine himself far more than my years here in this body. And one day we were looking on some Facebook group, and lo and behold, there was somebody with an Indian name, a name from India, and he was giving kind of a lecture on some subject, and Rumpelstiltskin looked, and he said, "There's my pineapple." And he got into a little bit of a back and forth with this Indian fellow, and Rumpelstiltskin immediately took a dislike to this person, and he started calling him Pandit. So Laurent was reminding me of this story because Rumpel's not here, and Rumple really disliked Pandit, but he liked Pandit because Pandit was intellectual. And there was nothing better than a good fight between intellectual Rumpelstiltskin and Pandit. And it went on for, I don't know, maybe a day or two back and forth. And then eventually, I guess it just got dropped. And I can't remember what they were fighting about intellectually, but Rumple thought that, I think we came to the conclusion that Rumple bested Pandit. Pandits are, well, if they're from India, they're generally something to do with someone knowledgeable in the doctrines, in other words, the literature around, well, is it a religion, spiritual tradition? But somebody who is well versed in the doctrines of, let's say, Hinduism. And to be really well versed, I don't think it's possible because it's an ancient religion. And if you can imagine how many hymns and poems have been written, and how many different sadhus and seers there have been over the centuries, unbelievable amount of information. And I think well, this Pandit knew some, but he certainly didn't know everything. And that's the problem with an intellect, is you might have read this and memorized it, but it doesn't mean you wrote it or you really understand it, or you can do anything more than repeat what was written. But it's still valuable. I mean, somebody's got to keep these stories alive somehow by reading them and then giving us an interpretation of what it is. So good on you, Pandit, wherever you are. And that's sort of the end of my story. I'm sorry I can't give you any more details. Laurent was racking his mind too. We couldn't remember exactly what Pandit was talking about. All we know is that Rumpelstiltskin just got his saber and got in there and cut him to pieces. That's your story. I'm Harry Weaver, your narrator. Oh, Laurent wants me to add, just getting back to my talk yesterday about distortions that came from Law of One. If you consider that English is, I don't want to say universal language, but it's, for planet Earth, it's pretty much used as a language that other people can operate in, even if it's not their first language. I'm sure I'm not sure, but I'm going to bet there's more people that speak different dialects of Chinese than speak English. But that's concentrated in China. And for the rest of the world, at one time French was considered one of these universal languages, but not so much now. Perhaps in Africa it still might be used as a common language. But there are so many languages in India. Tamil that I mentioned, and then Hindi, Punjabi, I know there's other languages, plenty of tribal languages, and then if you go way north to towards Pakistan, and I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that right, because when I hear somebody who's from that area, they pronounce it somehow differently. It's that clipping from India, the clipped English. But Urdu is another one of those languages. And so, what did they do? I guess they learned English and then they translated whatever they had into English, and that's how it made its way to my hands. And it was quite strange when I was in university and I was looking through the catalog of courses and degrees you could get, and they did offer Sanskrit. And I remember looking at the page, Sanskrit being the old language of India. It'd be I don't know how old, but very old. And I didn't know what Sanskrit was. We didn't have the internet at that time, and I didn't have a dictionary with me, so I just remember looking at it in the university catalog, and what a strange thing, I've never heard of this word before. What is this course on Sanskrit? And those years of university, I never knew. Many years later, when I start looking through all of my books on world religions, and I come across, well, this is what Sanskrit is. I remember seeing it so many years ago. So it's just funny that I just stumbled across it in the university catalog instead of just flipping past it, just an unknown word. I remember stopping and looking at it. And I guess I didn't read too much of the catalog either. Or maybe it was just, it's something from India, and I wasn't there to learn. In hindsight, I probably would have enjoyed the course immensely. I don't know if it was taught in English or not, but I'm not about to go back to my alma mater to look up how to learn Sanskrit, because as I say, I have a hard enough time in English, and trying to learn when we were young, we had to try to learn French in school, and it was a balderdash of a thing, My French is heavily accented in English, and it sounds shitty. If you hear somebody who speaks proper French, my French is abominable, and I just don't have the vocabulary. And that was from about 5th grade on to about 10th or 11th grade. So it was quite a few years of taking the subject and, trying to learn Sanskrit. Unless, I was struck by lightning or something and it awakened some latent facility in the language. Anyways, I'm kind of babbling along. Thank you for listening.